at the lowest level, what I'm seeing is cream in the coffee, which is to say the second law of thermodynamics.
Yes.
At the lowest level, the
Entropy?
work is done by the moving through the specific characteristics whereby some kind of gradient in energy or gradients in energy can be moved into the direction of equilibrium.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's why the coffee swirls, is that the production of that geometry is associated with a specific resolution of thermodynamic gradient in the context of gravity and in the context of, for example, the chemical difference between cream and coffee.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of potential energy of temperature flowing through the context generates, for example, swirls. And then eventually...
One of the most beautiful descriptions of thermodynamics that I've heard, and probably one of the most elegant articulations. Also, extemporaneously on the second law. So I'm very impressed.
Yeah. Well, I think we're doing some very interesting jazz right now. I am feeling inspired. Maybe that's what's up.
Awesome.
So, and I should note, typically speaking, the story of the second law is very flat. But the way I just described it tries to bring out the fact that the reality is anything but flat.
Mm-hmm.
So let's do the specific. I've got a... All right, so let me move back. Let me do a different one, a different degree. So you and I want to communicate. In the beginning, and this, by the way, the actual shape of this is an S curve.
Okay, right.
In the beginning, we have a lot of potential, which is hidden but behind our distinctness in who we are.
Mm-hmm.
I know you ever so little, like barely. In fact, I know you just enough to actually feel comfortable beginning the process of getting to know you.
Right.
Persian first.
If only I had
if you know that one, that's exactly.
If only I had a private jet and a white tie affair, to whisk you off, we would have, many more hours and opportunities to, and the context.
And unfortunately, we would also explore the multidimensionality of that. So then what happens is that what's the right way of thinking this? So for me, if I spend time contemplating how lightning works, like in a cloud, a storm, what I notice is that, have you ever seen that little glowy ball thing that came out in the 70s or 80s that has, like, in glass and has fronds of electric? Like,
yeah.
You put your fingers on it and it forms a
Weird Science, the Weird Science movie. Isn't that the
That's one of the icons.
Yes, right.
That's how you make hot. I understand my underlying technology of Hollywood. So remember, I don't know if you've ever done that, but when you put your finger on it, you see there's like a cool little halo that forms around your finger. And then you notice that the little lightning bolt almost like it oscillates around back and forth. And it's almost like they're trying to find a way to make a connection. Like this side, which has the ball that has the energy, and this side that has the finger, which in this case would be the ground,
right,
are almost trying to figure out. It's almost like literally that level of anthropomorphic seeking, like they're looking for, and then it kind of gets a little closer, and then they connect. And when they connect, the whole thing strengthens into a channel. That's actually how it happens in general across all phenomena of this sort. So you have a gradient. In the context of the gradient, ephemeral relationality shifts the context of the relationship in a direction where the gradient pulls or creates change in the context of the relationship, such that the space of relationality begins to have more structure oriented in a given direction. So it moves from randomness to having a certain structure. run the clock forward. It's still ephemeral, but now the ephemerality begins to have a slightly lower degree of pure randomness and has a higher degree of every once in a while, it's more likely to land closer and closer together.
Right.
Yeah?
Right.
And then eventually what happens is there's a point, which in this case would be something like a resonance frequency.
Mm-hmm.
And when that point, that threshold point occurs, and what's beautiful in this example is you can literally see it visually, the contact between the two edges, finally the plasma connects.
Mm-hmm.
Then what happens is a very rapid establishment of the channel.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
now we're in the middle, we're into the S-curve. So in that S-curve example, the first part is happening here.
Right.
There's a point called the nape of the curve where you've actually moved into the second stage, where the channel has been connected. The relationality has begun the process of having enough homogeneity,
Mm-hmm.
enough sameness, enough similarity, enough sharedness, enough commonality, that there is now a capacity for the gradient to begin the process of flowing back and forth with a higher rate and smoothness. Does that make sense?
Yes, it's reducing the stochasticity, basically. You're like narrowing the Brownian, just to use a lot of scientific metaphors all at once. But yeah, you're removing the random Brownian motion, basically, by creating order. But as you were saying, it's a probability and a potential, and it doesn't quite establish. It takes a while to establish because you're narrowing the space for the randomness, basically.
Boom. That's it. That piece, like the ontological notion of the idea of there being a space for the randomness, right, and the fact that one actually can engage in a changing of the shape of the space for the randomness, which is right, the space of probability, the probability landscape, is the thing that's actually happening in that first phase. Once you've, and by the way, of course, it's not randomness in the abstract, it's randomness in the practical, the concrete, right? I am in some sense ululating random noise in your direction because we both happen to have spoken the same language, already beginning with a pretty structured construct, but creating shared, like being able to read your facial expressions, your tone, subtle signals. We've already established a bunch of pre-ordered concepts and a felt sense of connection, right, emotional confidence that we can actually do, like all that shit, all of it has now begun to narrow. Once the channel narrows with a certain dimension, the rate at which ephemeral events end up being ordinated by an upgradient in connectivity hits a threshold, and now the gradient flows as rapidly as the channel. And by the way, now we're going to move into things like fluid dynamics,
right,
into a flow,
right,
yeah,
right. Yeah, you can shape.
And then it becomes homogeneous, right? Then the gradient closes, and the homogeneous. Then of course, at a certain point, you have an equilibrium in the context of the dimensionality of the things that are in relationship.
It's beautiful. I love that. That's great. This is such a great description.
Yeah. Neat. I'm really glad to have been able to share that. That's something I've been holding for about 20 years. I think this is the first time I think anybody's actually received it.
Wow. Thank you.
It's always very hard with him.
I can visualize it.
In his case, he's like, yeah.
This, I could visualize like the, ordering of things too, which brings about this, this connection, first with language, then nonverbal cues, the different ways in which we're kind of processing everything.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you dance, but for example, if the two of us were like dancing at the same time, so increasing the dimensionality of relationality, right, and of course you immediately notice, if you think about it, if both of us are sophisticated dancers in a particular style, like we're both good at salsa, then we can take advantage of that communications channel and the bandwidth of communication is possible in that to accelerate the process, right, of communication. Right. By contrast, if neither of us are, then we have a much bigger S-curve because we're learning a much larger space of dimensionality. Right. So it's interesting to think about how those trade-offs work.
Right.
And there's an advantage of getting access to a much larger dimensional space, but it also is a lot more time and work in the upfront before you've established that thing.